The Ahab, Jezebel spirit, and Baal worship are alive and well in the American West. That's what today's video is going to go ahead and be about. I feel like I've got a strong case for this. And of course, it's going to lead into a whole bunch of other videos I'm going to be doing because those topics, these brief things that I'll bring up, they're going to be needed to be extrapolated on later on. But today I figured this is a video that I would get started with. So I'll go ahead and look to shrink myself down here. Let's see. All right. So who is Jezebel, or who was she? So basically, she was the wife of King Ahab. She worshipped Baal. This was a Canaanite god we'll get into later. She then tempted Ahab into it, and then in turn the rest of the nation of Israel. She had the prophets killed, and she is known as what's known as the wicked woman of the Bible. So real quick, prophets. Who are they? Because obviously we had different prophets named in the Bible, like namely Elijah, right? You had Moses. You had different prophets throughout the Bible, but there were also prophets that were not named. So this is going to be important for later as to what prophet really means and how we can look at those same things today. So just briefly, I want you to think of a prophet as somebody who simply just tells the truth the way that God kind of interprets it to them. It's not that God's necessarily directly speaking to them. I mean, he could, but it's their perception of information that they're filtering through a biblical lens. So keep that in mind for later down the road. Now, who is Ahab? Okay, Ahab was a weak man. He was manipulated by Jezebel. Anything that she wanted, he basically did for her. Even setting up altars to Baal in specific cities in the nation of Israel at the time. Then you have Baal, right? He's the central figure of the Canaanite religion, the religion of which God said, you have to wipe them off the face of the planet. Then like fertility, storms, child sacrifice. Okay, so basically this is a god that the Israelites were swayed to because it's more comfortable for them. It feels like it fits their mold a little bit better, and that's important because we have to realize that our God, Yahweh, ultimately, right? He's not to be messed around with. He's not supposed to be like we're not supposed to make a carbon copy of sorts. Like we're supposed to just worship him. And what's happened here is Baal, who I think is ultimately Satan, had kind of twisted the culture at the time to make them all think that they were still worshiping God, even though they weren't. The Bible doesn't speak in secret, but it does show. It's like basically what I'm trying to get at is, do you think a whole country of people, a whole nation of people, would knowingly just swap over and worship a completely different God? No, something like that happens over time through actions, through little concessions of a moral compass, similarly to what I think we do today. So, how does America worship the same spirits today? Well, you see lots of women with this Jezebel spirit through feminism, through like at home, they're not being godly wives to their husbands. They're causing strife. They're not being happy with what they have. They're demanding more and more and more of their husband. They withhold any kind of love. They're very unruly. They're very wicked. They're not submissive to their husbands as a way that wives should be. But that's also a representation of, humans to God as well, which maybe I'll do a later video on that. Next, you have weak men with the spirit of Ahab who are caving to their morals. There's that phrase, happy wife, happy life, something like that. And they just want to keep the peace. They'll tolerate all the degeneracy, all the, bad characteristics of their woman. They'll tolerate that because they think they're doing the right thing. They think they're keeping the peace. They think they're living a godly life, right? Then you have, child sacrifice, abortion. right? You know, there's a lot of women out there who simply just want to, I mean, I've seen it, and I know it's rare. I'll preface by saying I know it's rare. But you see women out there posting on social media about how they're proud to get X amount of abortions. It's like, that's just absolutely insane. The next thing to consider with the this whole keeping the peace thing with Ahab, and it's just, we've noticed we've had this switch of culture. We had strong men and strong women. We had men going out and working, women staying at home being homemakers. Everything was going well in American society. And then as soon as we started letting these spirits back in through sin and stuff that God would not want us to do, they slowly take over everything. And everybody today still thinks that they worship God, right? Everyone still thinks that they're worshiping the real Jesus. What they don't realize is that they're actually not. What is worship, right? People will say, oh, it's going to church, it's doing this, it's doing that. I would argue that worship is actually the way that you live your life. Worshiping God through how you live your life, or worshiping whatever it is that you worship through how you live your life. And if you look at it through that lens, you realize very quickly, might I add, that our American culture, this Christianity that we think we know, has actually largely been subverted over these last 3 generations, between boomers, Gen X, and, well, millennials too, so I guess 4, and now Zoomers, soon to be Alpha. You're talking about like 5 generations right there that don't know what the truth is anymore. And why don't you know what the truth is? Well, the reason why you don't know what the truth is because these prophets are killed. Anybody who steps up and becomes a truth teller, anybody who steps up, typically in the name of God to some extent, and says, hey, no, this is actually what's supposed to be going on, they're the ones that people like Jezebel, people like Ahab, they recognize the threat that a good prophet is, and so they go ahead and they off them somehow, whether that be through today's cancel culture, like Nick Fuentes at first, or they actually take them out, because we've had plenty of people, as we know, this isn't a conspiracy theory, this is fact, we've had a series of people who ask the same questions, who arrive at the same conclusions, and once their voice gets too loud, they're plucked out of the world, and they're like, they get forgotten about until somebody else rises up, until another prophet rises up. You have to think of things through a different biblical lens than you've been traditionally taught, because the way we've been traditionally taught has been deliberately misleading to us as people. But I don't want to make this video too long. That's all I got for this one. I will see you in the next one.